the whole idea of this series of interview is to get like to bridge the gap between the professors in the physics department and
Right.
the incoming students. Hopefully, also like the students like who are currently attending Ohio State at the physics department and astronomy.
Right.
And
But this means I could have more people knocking at my door.
which is a good thing, I guess, like for everyone, I would say. But yeah, it's meant to cover like multiple topics, mainly like your journey and getting a perspective of how it looked like for you going
Sure.
into physics and getting into a professorship kind of track, and also like highlighting some things about your research topics, like collaborations, things like that, as well as like giving advice to students,
Sure.
like all the students, but mainly students attending Ohio State and like the stages they go through.
It's ready.
Okay, so I think the first thing we want to talk about is just getting like a whole picture of your undergrad journey. Where did you go for undergrad? How did it go for you? And if you can give us like a brief overview of the undergrad, then the grad, all the way up to your position now at Ohio State, as much detail as you wish. So.
Okay. I had kind of an unusual journey to this point. When I was young, I was interested in science, but I didn't know how to be a scientist because I'd never met one. I'd met, doctors and engineers, but I'd never met, researchers like we are right now.
Is this due to like the society or the culture you were in?
That's a good question. I don't know, maybe just social class or something. I'd never met any actual working scientists. I knew they existed, but I'd never met one. I had no idea what they actually did all day. It wasn't the only thing I was interested in, but I was interested in science. In high school, I had a kind of a rough time. I went to 3 different high schools for reasons, and there was one semester when I almost flunked out, and then later in high school, eventually did start getting better grades, but a bunch of my friends were in like AP classes, which were kind of new at that time, honors classes, those kinds of things, but I was not. I was in just the regular track and taking auto shop and metal shop instead of like AP bio or whatever. So I knew I wanted to go to college, but I didn't really know what to do. At that time, I lived in Kansas City. I applied to one college, the University of Kansas. I heard it was a party school, and all of my friends were going there. So, I applied to one place. I got in, and
there's no like physics in the background yet, right?
Nothing.
Nothing at all. Okay. Just like a
general studies kid.
Okay.
Nothing.
All right.
Based on my like SAT, ACT scores, I got some engineering scholarships. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll be an engineer. One uncle and one grandfather had been engineers, so I thought, okay, that seems reasonable. So I started in that. First semester, absolutely hated math. Took calculus at college. I never took calculus in high school. So first semester in college, I took calculus. I hated it. Did poorly. And, also started computer programming, did poorly. I was not really ready for college. And then second semester, I took physics, and I definitely hated that. I don't know, for some reason they always had people start physics in the second semester at that place, University of Kansas. And like one of my buddies, it was super easy for him, but physics was super hard for me. I just didn't like it. And even though I liked the class in high school. And then at one point the professor said, come see me in my office. I was getting like C's on the exams. He said, basically, kid, I think you can do better. And we talked more, and I felt challenged, and I tried to do better. And one of the things he told me is you just got to work more problems. So, eventually I just, basically, worked most of the problems in the book kind of thing. And came in for the final exam, eventually sat down. He came up to me and he said, "Kid, this final exam is your course grade. Everything that happened before the midterms, homeworks, forget it. Your entire course grade is whatever you do on the final exam."
This is during the final exam?
Yeah, right at the beginning of the final exam.
It's a stressful situation, but yeah.
So I finished in like half the time, and he said, "Sit down, kid, go check your work." Did. I was happy with it. I turned it in. And then, nothing happens for a few days because this was the paper era. A few days later, I was sitting in my dorm room. I was packing up to leave. I was just about to unplug the phone and steal it, actually, from the dorm. But then the phone rang, and it was this guy, and he said, "Well, you got a perfect score on the exam." And I said, "Wow, good." He said, "You're going to take the next physics class, right?" And I said, No way in hell. And eventually he talked me into taking the next physics class. And then when I showed up in the fall, he saw me in the hallway and offered to get me started on research. And so I did. And around the same time, I was having similar experiences in math, where basically eventually some faculty member noticed me and said, "I think you can do better. Let's try to get you on a better track." And once I got some help from those faculty members and got chances to get involved in research, then I started to become more self-propelled.
I think it's more about mentorship. That's actually good.
Definitely needed the mentorship because I had no idea what I was doing. I was just a dumb kid, and it was the mentorship, and then also especially the chance to get involved in research. I mean, it's cool what happens to a block on an inclined plane, but it's much more cool to solve a question that nobody knows the answer to. And so once I started getting involved in research, I felt really energized by the unsolved questions. And then that made me interested in the plain old course material. But the plain old course material about the block on the plane or whatever, I just didn't care. So, then after a rough start at the beginning of college, things got better and better because I was doing more and more research and getting more and more mentorship, which I really needed. Eventually, I was trying to decide if I wanted to go to grad school in physics or math.
So, just to recap, after your second, once you enter your second year, you decided you're gonna continue in physics.
Yeah, right. So, after I took a couple of physics classes, I eventually switched from engineering to physics, and I said, "Okay, this is for me." Once I was doing research and succeeding in the physics classes, I was like, "Okay, I get it now. I like it," and I realized physics was for me, not engineering.
Was this an astrophysics research or
Oh yeah, actually a lot of it was basically astrophysics.
Okay. So you saw yourself converging more toward astrophysics?
At that time I was just wanting to do physics. Okay. One thing I did that was really good is I got in a bunch of summer programs at national laboratories. 2 in the US, Oregon and Fermilab, and then 1 in France. And that really energized me about wanting to get command of the subject, because a person will do their best work when they feel like they're working for themselves, as opposed to working for a boss. Boss says, "Do this, do that." Yeah, okay, whatever. But if you're working for yourself, you have a different kind of drive. And it was getting involved in research and getting more independence and agency that made me more excited to carry on my work. So eventually I went to grad school. I started in particle theory.
Which grad school?
Oh yeah, University of Wisconsin.
Why did you choose it? Did you apply to multiple schools?
I applied to multiple schools.
Was there a specific reason on why you chose Wisconsin?
Yeah. I visited some other places, and the students at those other places seemed unhappy. and unproductive. And when I went to Wisconsin, they seemed happy and productive. And I thought, okay, I want to be part of that. So I started in particle theory, and then my first advisor and I were not the right match for each other. Took us a couple of years to figure out.
Couple of years.
Yeah.
Okay. Like how long? Like 2, 3 years?
2 or 3 years.
Okay.
So when I switched advisors, at that time, there was no World Wide Web. So basically, all the department faculty had their CVs in like big 3-ring binders in the department office. I went down and I read everybody's CV and other stuff like that. And I ultimately decided that I didn't care about the topic area. I only cared about I mostly cared about did I feel excited to talk physics with that person? So I thought, look, I'm a scientific mind. I can be interested in lots and lots of things, but I want to feel inspired by the people that I work with, and I want to feel like we're just on a similar wavelength. So eventually I narrowed it down to 2 faculty. One was nuclear theory, and one was atomic experiment. So very, very different. Either one of those could have been a great choice. Ultimately, I went with nuclear theory. And
so that's the point where you decided between theory and experiment? Kind of?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
And both of those faculty, I felt excited about physics when I talked to them. And they were supportive, and they provided mentorship, and they challenged me, but they supported me. It just felt like fun. And when you feel like your work is fun, you can do your best work. Yeah. And so that was my second PhD advisor, Baha Balantikin. And we worked on neutrino astrophysics together. And that was fantastic. Then, eventually I finished grad school, and I took a postdoc at Caltech. That was in a nuclear theory group, again, doing neutrinos. And then a few years later, so that was the Sherman Fairchild postdoctoral fellowship at Caltech. And then a few years later, I got the David Schramm Fellowship at Fermilab in Chicago. That was in an astrophysics group. So by this time, I'd now worked in particle and nuclear and astro, which is something I liked and that I'm still doing. Both of those postdoc jobs were fantastic at Caltech and Fermilab. I worked with really great people, and it was super fun and productive. Still, there's a lot of existential terror in the sense of like, am I going to get a job? But it was great. And then I started here at Ohio State in 2004.
Did you have like multiple positions to choose from, or why did you choose OSU?
There was another place that made me an offer of an offer. And I said, well, I'm already holding an offer from Ohio State. And I thought this would be better. And the reason I thought it would be better is the astrophysics efforts in Ohio State were already strong, but I could see that the first and second derivatives were positive, and I wanted to be a part of that. I also I interviewed at MIT, and I said, what's going to happen? And they said, well, we're going to think about it. And I said, okay, fair. And I said, but look, this Ohio State offer has a deadline. And they said, well, why don't you just turn it down and wait and see what we do? And I said, how about no?
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, eventually they said, well, look, if we did make you an offer, would you come here? And I said, I'm not so sure. And they said, well, why? And I said, well, because you have a reputation of treating your junior faculty terribly. And, look, a bunch of my friends who came here, they lost their hair. Well, okay, I lost my hair coming here, but okay. They lost their hair, they lost, yeah. They lost their hair, they lost their spouse, they lost their mind, you lost tenure. And I was like, you guys have a terrible reputation. And they were like, yeah.
So you would say like the two key points going through undergrad and grad school were like mentorship and
yes,
looking toward doing something you really like doing.
Yeah, right. There's a guy who studied myths and anthropology and all of that stuff. His name was Joseph Campbell. And one of the pieces of advice he gave to young people was follow your bliss, meaning follow the thing that you're excited about, and just wherever that goes, just go. And that's something I've tried to do.